This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. America, it is so back. I was over in the States in October last year and I cannot wait to get back there just so I can embrace this new vibe, a vibe that really started on November 5 and is absolutely still there 3 months later. Even Aussies down under can feel it. America is back, people are still celebrating, and Donald Trump is delivering on his promises. Now, Trump became the first sitting president to attend the Super Bowl yesterday, and check out the cheers from the crowd when the cameras turned to him.
Through the perilous fight, o'er the rampart.
Do you get a sense of how the American people are feeling in the stadium looking at Donald Trump? They're still buzzing from his victory, and Trump, well, he looks as proud and as relaxed as ever, which is incredible to see for someone who is taking more action in a few weeks than Joe Biden took in 4 years. But also for Trump, the fighting is over. He won. He survived 2 assassination attempts last year. He can't run again, so he knows how precious this time is, and he's not wasting a second. And we'll get right into the latest on his executive orders, what the DOJ team is finding, and Trump's latest warning to Hamas later in the program. But just back on the Super Bowl, the crowd reacted a little differently when the cameras turned to Taylor Swift, and it wasn't a great night for Taylor at all, because not only did she get booed, her boyfriend Travis Kelce told the cameras that it was an honour to have Donald Trump there.
So you guys, your reaction was to finding out the president would be in the game on Sunday?
That's awesome. It's a great honor. I think, no matter who the president is, I know I'm excited because it's the biggest game of my life, and having the president there, it's the best country in the world.
But this answer has sent lefties into a complete spin. They're freaking out that a football player is showing some respect for the president.
Know that when you have a platform, what you say matters. And it is so disappointing that somebody with that platform would say everything that he said about Trump coming to the game. And it's such a slap in the face to everyone whose rights are up in the air right now.
It actually baffles me that Trump derangement syndrome still exists. What reality are these lefties living in? Donald Trump won, his administration is unbelievably prepared, and the work has only just started. While the rest of America is embracing the MAGA movement, there are still some miserable Democrats that have severe TDS. A Michigan Democrat has announced that she has become voluntarily sterile because Donald Trump won the election. She said, just under 2 weeks ago, I underwent surgery to ensure that I would never have to navigate a pregnancy in Donald Trump's America. Is someone going to tell her that her rights have not been taken away like the left claimed that they would under Donald Trump? In fact, rights for women just got stronger as Donald Trump made sure that biological men can no longer compete in women's sports. It is wild, but it's not just lefties that are so brainwashed that they can't even see the good that Donald Trump is doing for his country. The left-wing media outlets, well, some of them are peddling disgusting race-baiting rubbish and deranged theories about Donald Trump. Here is The View's Ana Navarro claiming that Donald Trump will ban black people from the Super Bowl halftime show.
You know I don't do sports, you know I don't do football, so I wasn't watching the game. But listen, I think today Donald Trump is going to sign an executive order banning black people from halftime.
It is absolutely disgusting. They have to make up these theories because they have nothing else to attack Trump on other than lies. How sad and desperate and possibly a new low from The View. And do they have any idea that the majority of Americans are celebrating that Donald Trump is back? Joining us now is commentator and TV personality Emily Austin. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. Since we last spoke, a lot of waste and corruption has been exposed thanks to Donald Trump, Elon Musk and DOJ. We know that millions from USAID has been thrown on DEI projects in other countries. There are reports that USAID gave millions of dollars to a Palestinian cement factory in Gaza, which has sparked suggestions that money went to building Hamas tunnels, so essentially funding terrorism. And now this photograph has surfaced showing USAID items in Lebanon amongst weapons. It makes me feel sick. You know, I guess I'm grateful that finally there is someone going through the books and exposing this corruption at USAID. What's your reaction to all of this?
It's actually pretty disheartening to find out that USAID is something only started by Trump's government and Elon Musk and Doge, because this is such a bipartisan issue. The lack of efficiency in the American government and lack of accountability of locating where our funding is going is disgraceful for a country as big and powerful as the United States. Now taxpayers are finding out your money is not just being reallocated to places we don't know, but it's funding terrorism. You're telling me we built the tunnels in Gaza because of USAID? And the fact that it's only coming out now, and you only mentioned two of the issues, but $9 million of USAID's money went to a Syrian national who then distributed it to proxy groups of Al-Qaeda. It's really the best front for money laundering for terrorism.
It's so dark what keeps getting exposed. Now, Donald Trump says that he expects Elon Musk to find hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse at the Pentagon. Here he is on Fox News.
I've had a great help with Elon Musk, who's been terrific.
Bottom line, you say you trust him.
Trust Elon? Oh, he's not gaining anything. In fact, I wonder how he can devote the time to it. He's so into it. But I told him to do that. Then I'm going to tell him very soon, like maybe in 24 hours, to go check the Department of Education. He's going to find the same thing. Then I'm going to go to the military. Let's check the military. We're going to find billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse.
Sounds like, Emily, we haven't seen the worst of it yet.
I don't think we've even reached beyond the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. When it comes to the Pentagon, you know, people are really outraged that we dare investigate the Department of Defense, but people get audited, banks get audited. How else do you make sure that everything's running efficiently if you can't monitor it? I mean, if you don't look, it'll turn into USAID if you can't account for where the money's going to. When it comes to the Pentagon specifically, they failed 8 years in a row audits from the US government, and nobody's concerned about that. 8 years in a row failure for lack of accountability, lack of bookkeeping, lack of finance tracking, lack of allocating where military weapons have gone. How is that acceptable? You know, they mentioned the Department of Education is next. How many billions of dollars were spent on them? And where do we rank globally in education? We're failing. Everything that's been allowed until now is inefficient, and it's quite embarrassing because now it's airing out and we look foolish.
That's absolutely right. And there are still some Democrats complaining that this is taking place and that we're finding out about all this waste and corruption. Now, one of the latest reports out of the Doge team is that it has discovered FEMA sent $59 million last week, not over a year, just last week, $59 million to luxury hotels in New York City to house illegal migrants. Now, of course, that money is meant for American disaster relief, and instead it's being spent on high-end hotels for illegals. I mean, Emily, what do you make of this?
Beyond the fact that they're just ignoring Trump's executive order with fearing no consequences, beyond that fact is that there are so many American citizens who work so hard. They pay their taxes. They came into this country legally. They assimilated. They are still waiting for this money from FEMA because their homes have been destroyed by hurricanes. Kristi Noem's working on it right now in her district, but there's people whose neighborhoods, their houses have been destroyed completely and that are homeless right now. And imagine them watching the news and you see that illegal immigrants who disrespected our country by crossing the borders are now being rewarded for the illegal actions by a bureaucratic agency that we didn't put them there. And now they're wasting our money. It's just really disgraceful.
The amount of money, you know, it's just hard to keep up with. It's unbelievable. Let's turn our attention to something that never got enough attention from the mainstream media, and that is the assassination attempts on Donald Trump. 2 in 2 months last year. Now, President Trump has ordered the Secret Service to provide him every bit of information about his 2 would-be assassins. He told the New York Post that I want to find out about the 2 assassins. Why did one guy have 6 cell phones and why did the other guy have foreign apps? He said, no more holding back because of Biden. I'm entitled to know, and they held it back long enough. And he's absolutely right. We are all entitled to know what happened. You know, Donald Trump took a bullet for America, and it just seems weird that we don't know anything about the first shooter, really. Emily, what do you make of this?
I'll add another question to Trump's list. I want to know why Joe Biden, as the president, wasn't more concerned than finding out who these assassins were, because it's not only a threat to the President Trump, but it's a threat on national security. Now, Secret Service should fully do their due diligence and a full investigation on finding out not only everything about them, but publicize it, because we deserve to know who these murderers are that basically, I don't want to say got away with it, but it did not get the media attention, as you pointed out. And it could only help them with their security strategies. Maybe they were affiliated with a bigger group. Maybe they were paid. But these are questions that we deserve to know as the American people. But on a personal note, Donald Trump's life almost got taken so publicly. As a human being, shouldn't he know who the people were responsible behind his what could have been a murder? As a grandfather, as a father, as a human being, he deserves to know these things for his peace of mind.
Absolutely. And so it never happens again. Even though he's in power now, there's of course still a threat to his life. We need to know every bit of information that is out there, and we need to get it, as well as Donald Trump and of course his family. Emily, I want to talk to you about the situation in the Middle East. Terrorist group Hamas has announced it will delay the release of the hostages and has of course accused Israel of violating the agreement. Israel says, though, that this announcement from Hamas is a complete violation of the ceasefire agreement. You know, hearing this news today, my heart just breaks for the families who are still waiting for their loved ones to come home. Sadly, we know that not all of them are alive. But, you know, Emily, are you surprised that Hamas is doing this?
Wow, murderers, rapists are not following the law. That shocks me. Unfortunately, I'm saddened to even say this publicly. I feel the reason that they're doing this is because I'm afraid the hostages who are yet to come out might even be in worse condition than what we saw the other day. And the other day, we saw 3 men who went in there looking very healthy, coming out looking like they escaped Auschwitz or Birkenau or these horrible concentration camps, except the equivalency of comparing Hamas to the Nazis doesn't do justice, because I'll point out something very obvious. The Nazis tried to hide their crimes as much as possible when the war was nearing its end. They wanted to hide from humanity what they did and keep it a secret. Hamas is so publicly broadcasting, live streaming, taking pride in their murders, putting these hostages on stages like they're puppets that they're playing with, humiliating them on live television, and they're showing the world, look who we are. Yet some folks will act surprised when they see the dehumanization that Hamas is doing on the Israeli people and still choose to turn the blind eye. It's beyond me how you could still turn a blind eye in Hamas these days.
You're exactly right. Hamas is using this as a propaganda opportunity, and we saw those 3 hostages that had spent almost 500 days in captivity. They're reportedly suffering from severe physical and mental deterioration, including malnutrition, heart disorders, prolonged infection, which of course makes sense because the hostages endured physical, psychological abuse during their captivity. You know, looking at the images of them being paraded around by these terrorists just ahead of their release makes me feel so sick. I don't know how anyone can still support Hamas as they use this as a propaganda opportunity, Emily.
Of course. And, you know, I'll make your day a little bit better by sharing with you that about 20 minutes ago, Trump said that I think this Saturday, if Hamas does not release the remaining hostages, quote, all hell will break loose and it is over for them. So selfishly, I hope we reach what Saturday comes to and all hell does break loose, because now we have the U.S.'s support, which unfortunately Netanyahu did not have under the Biden administration. He was constantly suffocated. He was constantly giving red lines that he couldn't cross, aka don't go into Rafah. And then Israel goes into Rafah and they find their hostages there. So now that we have the support of the U.S. president saying if Hamas won't adhere to the ceasefire agreement, do what needs to be done, it feels good, both as an Israeli and as an American.
And if we didn't have Donald Trump back in power, we wouldn't have any of the hostages back at all. And we know that Trump's threats against Hamas work. They work to get that ceasefire agreement in the first place, and I'm sure they're going to work again. Look, I want to change gear here and end this on a lighter note. Let's talk about Donald Trump at the Super Bowl. It was absolutely iconic to see the crowd roar in support of him.
Through the perilous fight,
But it was a different reaction when the crowd saw Taylor Swift. Emily, what did you make of it all?
First of all, there's nothing more patriotic than a sitting American president, the very first in history to attend what's literally celebrating American excellence in sports. It's such a feeling of pride that we haven't felt in the last 4 years under Biden's administration. Now, the fact that Taylor Swift got booed, if I were there, I'd be booing too, because she, not even for a genuine reason, but because of her money, she got paid to endorse Kamala, who is possibly the worst candidate in history to ever run for president in the US. And football's a pretty patriotic sport. They're hardcore, American-loving, hardworking people who came to the Super Bowl. And now, if you need to choose between Donald Trump or Taylor Swift, I think they know which side to choose. But I want to go off on a tangent for a minute.
Sure.
Travis Kelce said that he was proud to have Donald Trump at the game. Now, Taylor Swift, let's just say I believe her that she actually endorsed Kamala. I just want to throw in there that I'm now skeptical that their whole relationship is fake, which has been a rumor, but now consider me convinced.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something, or there's probably a bit of trouble in paradise between Taylor Swift and her boyfriend. Finally, Hollywood lefties are still suffering from TDS. Richard Gere has now come out saying that Trump and Musk are a danger to the planet. Let's listen to this.
I'm coming from a place now that we're in a very dark place in America, where we have a bully and a thug who is the president of the United States.
And I'm in shock. My wife is in shock. We're all in shock. You know, the people spoke and they elected this president, and that's a fact. But I don't even think the people who elected him really believed that he was going to do what he said he was going to do.
You know, the fact that he's shocked and his wife is shocked just shows that he and his wife and many other Hollywood celebrities are just living in an alternate reality.
They're living in an alternative reality. I think they're genuinely afraid that now all of their dirty little secrets are becoming exposed. You know, I don't know if you heard, but USAID through Doge, when they went through this whole phase of investigations, they found out that Angelina Jolie got paid $8 million to go to Ukraine. Orlando Bloom got paid $8 million to go to Ukraine. These are we're funding celebrities through tax-paying dollars. And now a lot of them are going to be really embarrassed that A, shows their advocacy has been fake. It's been funded by we the people. And B, it just takes away all of their humility that now we're shown that they don't even stand for anything. They stand for whatever is filling up their wallets, filling their pockets, whatever Biden said went. And it's quite humiliating as a celebrity to have all your secrets now aired by Elon Musk. How humbling.
Absolutely well said. Commentator and TV personality Emily Austin, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you. Thanks.
Joining us now from London is the host of The Spectator Australia's Fire at Will podcast, Will Kingston. Will, great to see you again. As an Aussie, I have to get your thoughts on this. UFC boss Dana White has unleashed on the Australian media, and it comes a day after the Sydney Morning Herald editor Bevan Shields wrote a piece calling Dana White an enabler of hate. He labelled one of the most popular sports in the world gross, and he claimed that people in New South Wales just wouldn't support the state government's partnership with the UFC, even though it puts Sydney on the world stage and brings in millions of dollars through tourism. Well, Dana White has hit out at Sydney Morning Herald journalist Bevan Shields, and he didn't hold back on his thoughts on Australia's media. Take a listen.
Listen, for a place that is so tough and the people, everything on land and the water can kill you. You have the biggest I've ever seen in the media in my life. I saw a story where a guy was like, I saw Dana do a podcast with the Premier and it physically made me sick. Holy you guys have to have the biggest of all time in the media here. I thought we had weak media. You guys win hands down.
Well, unfortunately for us, I think Dana's right. What do you think?
Well, Dana, please don't lump Sky News in with the Sydney Morning Herald. I think they are very, very different beasts. But the interesting thing there, and I think this doesn't just apply to the media, it applies to the perceptions that Americans and the rest of the world have of Australia, in that they come to this country now and they still expect to have that old view of Australia, rugged individualists, anti-authoritarian, irreverence, think Paul Hogan type of thing. And you get to Australia today, and so often what you are presented with is the exact opposite of that now. Woke ideology has very much infiltrated our media along with all of our other institutions. I think we are now slower to get that pushback against wokeism compared to what we're seeing in the US. And I think you get people like Dana White who actually are genuinely surprised at what they see in Australia. And I think this is a wake-up call. We need to actually say, how do we actually get back to that old view of Australia, which we can all in our minds think about and push against what I think we all agree, particularly since COVID, is a very, very different and I think quite a troubling national identity that unfortunately we have reformulated for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Australia was on the world stage for all the wrong reasons during COVID. I think people right around the world were looking at places like Sydney and Melbourne and looking at the way we had these unbelievable long lockdowns and essentially no freedom of speech and a media that was very one-sided and was censoring all sorts of things. But speaking about the media, let's turn our attention to what's happening in the US. And the unedited footage from the CBS interview with Kamala Harris has been revealed, and it is so embarrassing for CBS and for Kamala Harris, as the answers were clearly edited to make it sound like Kamala Harris was capable of stringing a sentence together, which was certainly not the case. Here's what went to air, and here's the edited version.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Well, this isn't the only clip that surfaced, which is causing concern.
You're talking about how you're going to pay for it. So how are you going to convince a divided Congress that what you say, your plans, are something that they should all agree to and provide to the American people when they've shown no inclination to do that up to this point?
Is that what you needed?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. 30 seconds of silence, please, for Ruth John. Cameras are off.
How will you?
It's going to be taxes. It's going to be literally, if the economists.
And you can hear in her answer there, she was suggesting raising taxes, yet that didn't make the final cut. Now, Donald Trump has amended his lawsuit against CBS, doubling the amount that he claims he's owed for deceptive editing of a Kamala Harris interview from $10 billion to $20 billion. Look, I keep saying this, but no wonder people don't watch the mainstream media anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's two things here. There's the lawsuit, and then there's the matter of journalistic integrity. Any self-respecting journalist who watches that will know that that is a complete ethical breach. I understand that sometimes with an interview, you need to cut it down to fit into a particular time slot, but you need to maintain the same core message and the same tone from the interviewee. So you may cut out a complete question, for example. What they've done there is they've changed how she comes across. They've made her sound more confident. They've made her sound more precise. And the only test that you really need to have in your mind is, would they have given Donald Trump the same luxury? And the answer is, of course they wouldn't, which leads you to believe there is a very clear ideological agenda. And Gab, you're exactly right. Like, as a result of that, when people see this, they go, well, why should we trust this rubbish? Now, on the lawsuit itself, I actually don't think Donald Trump needs to be getting involved in this sort of stuff. For starters, everything I've been told is it's very unlikely he's going to win. The First Amendment in the US is particularly strong, and it generally precludes these types of lawsuits. CBS is digging its own grave. Their ratings are tanking. People will see this and they'll just lose more and more trust. He doesn't need to get involved in these skirmishes. I think he just needs to let nature take its course and let this channel deservedly die a natural death.
Yeah, and the damage has been done. You know, those clips are just going viral on places like X, on YouTube platforms, digital platforms, where more and more people are getting their media. Look, Will, you're probably feeling a sense of relief at the moment over in London, knowing that Harry and Meghan won't be moving back anytime soon. Donald Trump has ruled out deporting Prince Harry. There were, of course, calls for Harry to be deported if it turned out that he lied on his USA visa application about his past drug use. But Donald Trump, well, he obviously has a bit more on his plate than dealing with Prince Harry, and he's told the New York Post that he isn't interested in throwing Harry out of the country. He said, "I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife. She's terrible." Gosh, Donald Trump is funny. He never misses. What's the reaction been to all this in London?
Well, you just mentioned that Donald Trump is funny, and I think we all know that he's funny, but I think what sometimes we don't appreciate is how effective a political weapon that is. It does so much to sometimes mask some of the things that he says, which other people wouldn't get away with. But in this instance, this could have been a small but annoying political issue because, for example, you know, if he said very somberly, well, you know, Prince Harry is still a representative of the monarchy, one of our great allies is the United Kingdom. I don't think it is proper to deport him. Some of MAGA may have actually got a bit annoyed with that, and they would have said something like, well, he needs to follow the rules like everything else. Donald Trump negated that as with an issue in 2 seconds by having a cracking little joke about Meghan, which we all agree with, and at the same time he just kind of took it off his plate. So it's an interesting, it's a small story, but it's an interesting little insight into how he manages to use humor as a way to, as a political weapon, as opposed to just being a comedian.
I think a few more politicians here in Australia and right around the world could learn something from Donald Trump, maybe bring some humour into it. I don't know if they've got the personality like Trump.
You need to have a bit of charisma to go along with it, and I'm not sure someone like Anthony Albanese exactly has charisma in spades.
Oh, has he made anyone laugh in an interview? I'm not sure about that. Look, let's talk about... Let's talk about Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. It's hit a huge milestone. The party's membership has passed 200,000. So, of course, Nigel Farage has taken to social media to hail Reform's success as an incredible achievement. But he also insists that there are no circumstances, in which Reform would ever do a pact with Boris Johnson or the Conservative Party. Look, a lot can change between now and the election, but do you really buy this? Can Reform get big enough on its own to win?
Yeah, it can. I didn't think so 6 months ago. Now I absolutely do. And I also thought 6 months ago that they probably would end up merging with the Tories in some capacity. They are now convinced that they can win this in their own right. And if you look at the trend line, they can. The other thing about that statement that they put out, it is unequivocal. They've said basically the last thing we would ever consider, cross my heart and hope to die, is getting some sort of a relationship with the Tories. If they were to renege on that, it would completely breach any sort of trust that they have with their base. So I think we can now rule that out and end that conversation. I just don't think it's going to happen. The thing is, we're now in uncharted territory for a long period of time in the United Kingdom, where it is a 3-party race. So the old rules of, having to try and just beat the other party no longer apply. And it also means you don't need to have as big a share of a vote to actually end up winning the whole thing. In Australia, with the coalition Labor duopoly, you really need to have a vote share in the, high 30s or 40s. The Reform Party could end up winning this election with a 25 to 30% vote share. And so it's a very different way of thinking about it. They are tapping into a seething anger in the United Kingdom at the moment. Question is, can they keep that momentum up over 4 years? Again, I say to everyone, 4 years is a heck of a long time. So time will tell. But the current trend line for Reform is astonishing. And they have quite literally a once-in-a-century opportunity to revolutionise British politics.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. Let's talk about the WhatsApp scandal. A second Labor MP has been caught up in the WhatsApp scandal. Oliver Ryan has expressed his regret over his involvement in the WhatsApp group chat that contained unacceptable messages. And it comes after the health minister was sacked and suspended from the party after it was revealed he made anti-Semitic comments in that chat. Well, what's the latest here?
there's a few things that I think we need to keep in mind here. So this was the health minister, and someone in that group has obviously leaked all of the messages. And one of those messages was along the lines of, or just berating an elderly person in his electorate, as well as some very, very poor taste, or morally abhorrent, I should say, anti-Semitic comments. The first thing is, I don't think he's just being sacked for something that is morally abhorrent. He's being sacked for stupidity. Like, if you're a politician in this day and age, you should be well aware that anything you put down on paper or put down virtually could be used against you. So this is a punishment for stupidity as much as anything else. I think it opens some old wounds around anti-Semitism in the Labor Party. So if you remember, under Jeremy Corbyn, the previous leader, they had several scandals regarding anti-Semitism, and there was a perception that the Labor Party was institutionally anti-Semitic. This certainly won't help that perception, which, in fairness to Keir Starmer, one of the few things he's actually done relatively well is to start to actually manage that perception. But look, this is one of those stories where you just go, how stupid can you possibly be? I don't think it'll be a long-standing crisis for the Labor Party, but because Keir Starmer has made his entire reputation around this sort of pearl-clutching moralism, being the firm abider of the rules, these sorts of stories hurt Labor more than other parties because it just makes them out to be hypocrites. It makes them out to be like every other type of politician.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. Getting sacked for stupidity, it's unbelievable that politicians, or no matter who you are, if you've got a public profile, what are you doing putting, anti-Semitic comments anywhere, but inappropriate messages? They're going to come out. Look, finally, it's been revealed that just over 10% of young people in Britain are prepared to fight for the country, and only 4 out of 10 people in Britain are proud to be British. This is according to a new YouGov survey, and it found that a large minority of Gen Zs in Britain said that there were no circumstances at all that they would take up arms for their country. Will, what do you put this down to?
I think it's a perfect storm, and I wouldn't be surprised if you saw similar outcomes in a country like Australia. I think maybe there's been a bit of a bounce back under Trump, but in recent years, you'd probably see something similar in the US. I think, in the UK, we've had 20 years where the economy has been stagnant, and so living standards have declined. And that means that people, to be honest, similar to Australia, young people feel like they don't have a fair shot anymore. They don't have a fair shot getting a house. They don't have a fair shot, being able to get a good job. They're saddled with debt. They see migrants flooding over the border, being put in hotels, being given, all these sorts of taxpayer incentives as they feel like they're being left behind. And then they go, you know what? Why would I lay down my life for that? So there's the practical realities of living in modern Britain, which certainly are really difficult for young people. But the other thing is, we've got an education system in the UK, again in Australia as well, which has taught this black armband view of history. Colonialism was evil. The British Empire was evil. It doesn't actually reflect so many of the positive things that countries like the UK, like Australia, like the US have done in their past. And so if you've just heard this in school for 12 years and then you go to university, which is even worse, I'm actually amazed that there aren't more kids who aren't coming out of that and going, you know what? Yeah, my country is evil and morally reprehensible. So I would look at these sorts of studies and I would say, if people on the sensible centre right want to start building more pride in their country, look at the education system and start there, because it has been corrupted by the left for 20 years plus now.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Looking here in Australia, I'm sure that's true. What does give me hope, though, is we saw on Australia Day more people celebrating than ever. It was great to see young people waving the Australian flag and getting amongst the celebrations. We have to leave it there, but the Spectator Australia's Fire at Will podcast host, Will Kingston, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Gab.
Joining us now is former New York State Senator and Democratic strategist David Carlucci. David, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Look, how are you going? How are the Democrats going?
Well, it's an interesting time, but I think it's obvious that Donald Trump and his administration have just been stumbling after one move after the other. So I think Democrats are just playing this wait and see and figuring out what is the best way to move forward. But I think what you see now is just this organic rising up of just regular citizens across the country that are just very concerned and feel almost threatened by some of the actions that the Trump administration has taken. And they see that this is organically happening, where you have just residents around the country reaching out to Democratic elected officials and saying, what can I do to help push back against some of these wild policies that Donald Trump is trying to push?
I think Donald Trump is delivering on his promises, and the majority of Americans agree that that is what is happening right now. Let's talk about this CBS poll. Trump has started his second term with a positive approval rating in the new CBS YouGov poll, and in the poll it shows that 53% say that they support the way Donald Trump is handling his job as president. 58% say that he's been effective, and of course 70% say that he is keeping his word from the campaign. I mean, what do you make of that poll? What does it really tell you?
Well, look, any poll is just a snapshot in time. And yes, Donald Trump is making a lot of announcements, but he's not actually putting forth policy. He's making suggestions of the United States occupying Gaza and then not following it up with any real details. He's talking about making Canada the 51st state. And so what you have is just not even policies, not even proposals, but just fleeting thoughts that then Republicans have to try to figure out and try to back up. But yet you see there's no real game plan here. There's no strategy. It's just whatever comes out of the president's mouth, they just then run, scramble, and try to figure out how could this work. But what I'm waiting for is actual details. We talk about efficiency. We talk about cutting government waste. I've seen absolutely none of that. In fact, the employees that they're talking about firing, then the next day they're talking about they're going to rehire people. This is more of a loyalty test than about an efficiency of government. And that's the real concern. I think that's what Americans are waking up to and realizing that this is just a lot of talk, and there's really no plan for us, for the American people. It's just a plan for Donald Trump and his people.
You don't think that the Trump administration has been so prepared? You know, I hear what you're saying about Trump making these claims about Gaza, but they're a negotiation tactic. They're to get other countries on board to find a real solution for Palestine. And as for, you haven't seen any waste being cut. I mean, look what Elon Musk is doing. Look at what's being exposed.
What's being exposed? I mean, he's calling
millions of dollars being spent.
Organization.
Millions of dollars from USAID going to DEI programs overseas. Is that how you'd like your tax dollars to be spent?
I'd like it to be spent efficiently and effectively.
So is that efficient and effective? DEI programs overseas? That's a good waste or good use. Possibly.
I don't know. Possibly it is, yes. To say everything has to go, a whole government agency. Not only
they haven't said everything needs to go. They said waste needs to go.
You have Elon Musk, the first bro, if you will, is saying that USAID is a criminal organization, quote unquote. He's throwing all the work of thousands of people from our country around the world doing the work of our mission of trying to rebuild, of trying to have a positive impact on the world, and he's calling them criminals.
Yeah, but David, he has the receipts. He's going through the books. He's finding the millions of dollars that has been...
No.
He hasn't?
He's pointing to one or two examples and then extrapolating from that a whole conspiracy. And that's the problem. You see time and time again where Elon Musk in particularly has pointed out one circumstance and then called a whole organization corrupt or criminal. That's wrong. That has a chilling effect, and it has a lasting detrimental effect on recruiting the best and brightest to work for our country's government.
Look, I don't think it's a conspiracy anymore. Elon Musk has been doing the work with his Doge teams. More and more waste and corruption is being exposed every day, and there are several examples of that. And I'm sure many Americans...
I haven't seen a dollar amount. Can you point to a dollar amount of what is actually being saved? How much money is going to go back into American taxpayers' pockets?
Probably millions.
I can't point to anything. Probably. Yeah, well, we could say that all day long, but you can't actually point to a single dollar of savings. In fact, they're talking about expanding and hiring more people, and it's only about who is loyal to the Trump administration. Not about competency, not about effectiveness, but about loyalty.
Okay. I agree to disagree on that one. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has accused the FBI of corruption, alleging that the Bureau leaked plans for large-scale immigration enforcement operations in the Los Angeles area. So on Friday, the LA Times reported that ICE would oversee a large-scale operation targeting individuals without legal status in the US, and then cited an internal document. So Kristi Noem has condemned these leaks, saying that they really undermine federal efforts to enforce immigration laws. We know this was a big part of Donald Trump's campaign. This is what the American people voted for. Is Kristi Noem right here?
No, absolutely not. She hasn't pointed to any specific cases of corruption. She's again casting this wide net of saying that our Federal Bureau of Investigation is corrupt and that the law enforcement agents that put their lives on the line are corrupt and working against the best interests of our country. And she has not one single thing to point to. If you had some evidence, I would be all with you.
Who leaked the documents to the LA Times?
We have no substantial evidence that any FBI agents have done anything criminal or illegal, and yet we have the Secretary of Homeland Security making allegations of criminal activity of our federal law enforcement. It's a disgrace. It's an outrage. These are men and women that put their lives on the line to protect our nation's interests, and then you have the federal government, the Secretary of Homeland Security, making allegations of corruption without any evidence. That is wild, and it does no service to the men and women in law enforcement, and it's really a disgrace. If you had evidence, put it forward, and I would be right there behind you. I would be right there behind you, behind the secretary, to say, yes, then root out this corruption. Of course we need to do that. But when you cast a wide net and you say broad statements like that, that our FBI is corrupt, that's a huge problem, and it does nothing to help the situation, because she's not pointing to any one circumstance. She's claiming that this leak was demonstrated by corrupt officials with no proof. That's the problem. Again, you see this a pattern in the Trump administration, whether it's Elon Musk or Secretary Noem, making these wild accusations of criminal activity with no substantiated evidence. That's a real problem, and it's a chilling effect that will wreak havoc and damage to our nation for years to come.
David, so you think there's no corruption in the FBI and no corruption at USAID?
Well, no, I think there possibly could be. When you have large organizations, thousands of employees, I'm sure there probably could be corruption. However, I'm not going to say that there's corruption when I have no evidence and I just have a suspicion. We have to be adults. Their words matter. They are the leaders of our government. So you can't just make accusations because your plan isn't working out to the T that you expected. So you're going to find someone else to blame and make these wild accusations. These are serious libel accusations that should not be just thrown out there willy-nilly. And so that when there is actual corruption,
just to interrupt, sorry.
then you need evidence.
Yes, exactly. You need the evidence. So I suppose you would support then Elon Musk and his Doge team finding the evidence and exposing it for all of America and the world to see.
Absolutely.
So are you impressed with what he's discovered so far, and you support Doge?
Well, I support the theory of it.
The theory,
but I haven't seen
but
that.
not reality. You'd rather things be kept hidden?
No, absolutely not. I didn't say that. What I said is that if you have this evidence, then bring it forward. Show us. Yeah. Well, that's what we want to see, and that's what we're hoping for. But when you have situations like Elon Musk going into the Treasury and then complaining that he wasn't given access because he doesn't have the right security clearance, but then complaining that that's interference, that's not right. What that is doing is sending a chilling effect, so that no one will ask questions, and we will allow these people to have our most sensitive data. And that's what's really causing the backlash. When people learn that their sensitive data, their social security numbers, their tax information is being out there without any safeguards, that's the concern. And to say that Democrats or anyone is standing in the way of government efficiency and cracking down on waste, fraud, or abuse is absolutely wrong.
No,
that is not the point.
They're protesting against it.
No one is saying that. No, what I'm protesting against is the fact that they're going in and making these accusations with no proof. If you had the proof, show us, and I think everyone will be there right in line. But when you make these wild accusations that the whole USAID program, this whole government agency, is a corrupt organization, quote unquote, that's too hard to swallow. That's unbelievable.
David,
and if you had the information, then provide that. But that's not what's being provided.
Yes, it absolutely is. David, just finally, has the Democrats, do you think, have they really learned any lessons from the election? I don't know that they have.
Well, I think that they have. I think the difference is you have a Democratic Party, a big tent, different opinions and ideas on how to best move the country forward. Juxtapose that to what's the Republican Party, which has really become the party of Donald Trump. You can see in that there's no real ideology or principles guiding the party right now. Because if there were, you would take someone like Donald Trump and say, well, wait, you flip-flopped on so many different issues. You're talking about isolationism, or you're talking about preventing foreign wars. Well, now you're instigating and you're saying we're going to occupy Gaza. We're going to go in and maybe take the Panama Canal by force. This is like a 180 for the Republican Party, and it's hard to even understand what the Republican Party stands for other than being the rah-rah support cheerleader for Donald Trump. So I think that's the difference. And yes, is the Democratic Party perfect? No, by no means. And yes, are they trying to find a footing in this political climate and message to people in the United States? Yes. But I think the difference is when the dust settles here, you'll see that the Democratic Party actually stands for something, and the GOP is starting to fade away on principles, on character, on what they stand for, and is becoming unrecognizable.
David Carlucci, we have to leave it there. Thank you again for joining us on Power Hour.
You got it. Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.